All right, Jazz Cabbage Cafe. I am here. Jamie Lowell, Rick Thompson is here. Mr. Hashbash Adam Brook is here. And we're going to be joined by more people, but we start off joined by a lot of the crew from the Bros Grow Show, Sequence, Painted Lady, and Skilbo. We'll talk about their shows and all that kind of stuff for sure during this show, but also they're here to be part of the discussion with us too. And a lot of stuff they cover on their own show, which looks good and sounds good and offers a lot of great information for people. And as the title suggests, that show anyway, a lot of growing information, which I think is really popular for a lot of people out there.
Thanks for joining us on the Tuesdays of Tuesdays, which is the second of month of the 22nd day of 2022, 2/22/22. The Tuesdays of Tuesdays.
Right on.
Yeah.
And so we will, Red Setter's here. We'll bring them on in a second, but let's just take a look at our great sponsors, and then we'll move on with the discussion.
And Jazz Cabbage Cafe is, of course, sponsored by the Botanical Company.
Man, that music has defeated you again. Here's Red Setter joining us.
No.
Bro, let me tell you.
I allowed the music to be louder than me. I allowed that.
Yeah, I was jamming.
I do the same thing on my show, and I got to set all the volumes to 20% to equal the microphone volumes. It's insane.
Yeah. Well, you actually have some real production value. Yeah.
Just have a lot of credit. Is what we
Your show looks good and sounds good, man. And
we revel in our failure here.
I like it. Yeah, we're pretty raw here. We're not into the bells and whistles. We're just into some good information.
Compliments right off the bat. I like it. Thanks.
Right. Hey, so I just want to throw out a few announcements here real quick. I meant last night to mention that I stopped into the store that in Ferndale that I saw posted on online on the Cannabis Business Professionals page. Harry Barish had gone to visit them and mentioned they were not a non-MCMA company. They had a really good philosophy, and my caregiver is not feeling well, so I went there because of that discussion. And I really liked it a lot. It is true. They avoid those products. They know why. And their bud tenders are really good. And I got some really good medicine from there. So just good to have another commercial store that is in tune with kind of our general philosophy of not fucking with other people's rights or peeling back existing achievements of this community and not working with those who are trying to do that.
Only thing missing from that story is the name of the store that you had such a good experience in.
They're called Nature's Remedy, and my bud tender was named Rachel, and I did see old friend Christine Beebe working there too, and that's a sign of them hiring people who have a lot of experience in this field. So
Beebe's been around since since Jump, basically, in our industry.
That's an important thing that we like to talk about on our show, too, because we have several panelists that grow commercially and stuff like that. And we're like, hey, not all of these commercial guys are the same. They're not all against what we're trying to do. Mm-hmm. A lot of them are super strong advocates for the caregiver rights on the show and everything like that. So what's up?
I got a call from those guys yesterday at Nature's Remedy.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Nature's Call?
Oh, they were
call of nature.
The call of nature.
Yeah. Wow.
You look pretty sickly. Let's help you out.
Quite an accomplishment. I had a call of nature yesterday. Okay.
You are not too far away from them, Adam, and I think you'd like those guys down there.
Yeah, I realized that. They were looking for some information on an event I'm involved with.
There you go. Okay. Right on. So, just want to mention, too, that Grow Green, Michigan is going to have their Winter Expo on Saturday. That's the 26th. I'll be there with the Great Lakes Expungement Network, hopefully with Josie. They've been really cool with us. Went to an opening of Wellflower, a Wellflower location in Ypsilanti the other night. They got a really good location. They're right on Washtenaw, kind of away from, they're on the edge of the city, away from downtown, but in a pretty busy area. They've been really good with Glenn, too. Great Lakes Expungement Network. there's going to be Jamie Cooper's having a licensed cannabis event coming up next Tuesday night. We're probably going to broadcast from that hotel where it's going to be held. Botanical Company is one of those sponsors. Relief maybe also. Relief Solutions maybe also, now that I think about it.
And that's Mardi Gras night for Cincy Magazine. Yes.
Yeah. I'll
be there.
I was recently, I got to do a guest lecture for I think it's a 300 level class in Lake Superior State. They have a cannabis program there, and this was like law, politics, and compliance, I believe was the title. And it was a really fun time. Had a great time with that. I'm really happy that kind of stuff goes on. And during the conversation, I found out they had discussed during the class the Sinclair's Freedom Rally. As part of the historical perspective, which you would expect, but you never know, like, what actually is going to go on versus, what we all think should be kind of conveyed to these people. And I was happy to hear that professor and the class and everybody. And that's in part due to Tony Shinanaquet, good friend of the show and ours, who's been involved with hemp with her husband and whose kids are involved in the industry and who's in that class. So that was really cool. I want to throw that out there. One thing I want to talk about as we get going here, is the and there were some Native people in those classes, and it was in the UP in an area where we know that Bay Mills started off utilizing their sovereign position and starting their own model for cannabis, for a commercial cannabis system there. And in part, that was because they tried to contact the state for a really long time. We had the attorney on this show, I don't know, a year or more ago, probably 2 years ago or something like that. And the state did not respond. I mean, we have the department and everything that was there, but no response. And so they decided to just do it their own way, and they did. And there could be some really cool things that come from that, like being able to smoke a joint while gambling and stuff like that. But since then, other places have done it, and some have been less restrictive. There's some of these policies that allow for caregivers to bring their cannabis into that system, and then some of them are kind of conservative. We think probably had some Loom influence or something like that. And that's a company that's kind of infiltrated the tribal land scene already. But after all this, there is a bill that's recently been introduced, and I believe it hasn't been heard yet. It's going to be heard soon in regulatory reform. And in fact, the chair of that committee is one of the sponsors of the bill, Representative Hawk. And it would make it easier for any of these places that wanted to participate to plug into or work with the state system. I do believe they recognize that each sovereign nation can choose to implement their own policy in the midst of this. But one of my first thoughts was kind of like too little too late. And I also kind of encourage these less restrictive, less prohibitive approaches, because they can draw they can take advantage of the situation. They know what they're up against. So they can draw people into their system and do that. And that puts pressure on the state at large to be competitive and be less restrictive and less prohibitive.
Definitely. If they have better event license rules and stuff like that, it might draw a lot more attention to not state land, so to speak, and help push it that way as well.
Yeah.
Well, this is really just a money grab on the state's behalf, because they don't offer anything. It's not like they're saying, hey, you have the ability to acquire cannabis through our state regulated system, and it's so much better than the others, or some of these tribal lands are allowing caregiver product, as Jamie mentioned. Some are not, but some are. And, I would think that would be a major selling point as compared to, I have the same cannabis that every dispensary downstate has.
Yeah, I can tell you this with the Native groups. Whitney Gravel was the name of the woman that came and spoke to us. Yep, Whitney's just amazing. And the state legislature here in Michigan can't compel the tribes to participate in anything. All it can do is open the door. When the 2018 legalization bill was authored, we specifically left Native tribes out of it, feeling that we didn't have the ability to regulate them, which I think is correct. But now this would create a pathway for Native groups to be able to participate with the MRA. Here's the thing, as Adam mentioned, why would you kind of want to? Because that means you have expensive licensure, you have to open yourself up to MRA inspections, and now you're dealing with the whole system that you didn't want on your property anyway. So I think this is a Loom generated kind of a thing. They want to be able to have the same supply chain for all of their stores, whether they're on Native lands or not. And I just can't see all of the Native groups participating. I can't.
But it is a business. It does sound like a solid business plan on their behalf, because it is important for them to have that same supply chain at all these little venues, so that they can go to people like these music venues and say, hey, let us put a consumption lounge in your spot. Here's our cookie cutter plan. Here's exactly what we do everywhere we do it.
So every time you see a cannabis distribution center on Native lands, know that they're not integrating with the licensed market. They're not getting their stuff from the Green Peaks or from the regulated marketplace. So they're all supplied either internally or by caregivers, Jamie.
Oh, except for those situations where like Loom has got certain deals worked out where they can occupy those spaces, but they still work under the state regulatory scheme.
Yeah, it's just.
And there've been issues with that. I mean, we've experienced that. We've been up there. Rick and I have been up there some of these meetings with at least the Grand Traverse band, and have heard stories about how Loom promised many things and didn't really seem to deliver, and that relationship is soured for a lot of those people.
Especially if you're not training people to be their own bosses. If what you're doing is training a bunch of employees, you're not setting people up to be able to run their own shops. You're not giving them the knowledge necessary to be able to grow their own industry. And that, I think, is really the expectation that was had by the tribes, is that they would learn and then they would be able to do. And it doesn't seem like there's a lot of learning going on intentionally
with their partners.
Exactly correct. It seems like they're being the education's being kept from them. Yes.
Correct. And that's the problem, is that there's never a good partnership. And all these groups saw, I think they looked at the Native tribes as an opportunity, and it wasn't an opportunity to better the tribe. So
I think that's fair. I think that it's not our opinion. I think that's what other people that are involved more closely with tribal politics would agree with. Yeah. So the fact is, we're looking at the MRA, who's now been trying for a long time to get control of the Native market. Also, just recently been given control of the hemp market by the governor.
Yeah, and Theo asked about why or how they would be in control of non-medical stuff or non-medical hemp, and that is because it is now the Cannabis Regulatory Agency, and the point of that executive order was to house it all under the same umbrella. So.
Well, and I think for those of us that are in the know, I look at it as not even cannabis anymore. Now they're regulating all cannabinoids. If it's a cannabinoid, they want to regulate it.
That's true.
Whether it's a synthetic cannabinoid, in using their language, whether it's a naturally occurring cannabinoid in very, very low levels, whether it's a high, and that's what we set this up. We knew this was coming. The problem is, once again, we have uneducated people who are ill-informed or not informed running the show. And those of us
some even well-intended, but just so
right. It's not that these bureaucrats are doing anything other than their jobs. The problem is they don't know how, because they're bureaucrats, to say, we don't understand this. Go get us people who do. Yeah.
Or that the people that
teach us how to do what we need to do.
Or the people they listen to are people whose testimony has been bought and paid for, because they're essentially public relations specialists for corporate entities at this point. Even though you have a PhD or you have a degree in botany, that doesn't mean that the words that come out of your mouth are pure and true. You can relate a truth in a way which makes people assume certain things about it, which may or may not be true, and therefore it's just a bunch of trickery,
misrepresentation.
Well, that's why you hear like the word safety over and over in these things, and,
right?
All of that sort of stuff is to play on people's fear and pass these.
What about the children? This is a safety act.
Yeah, they don't want kids.
Of course, that's going to work. Look at what they're doing with the packaging. I mean, now nothing can have a cookie or any kind of candy or anything. So, of course.
The packaging thing has been hell. So it's been a nightmare. Having to put.
The interesting thing is that there are no experts in this that don't come from somewhere else, where they're trying to apply their expertise on an industry that they don't understand.
Yeah.
So it's creating a real problem because they're not wrong in some aspects. They just don't understand well enough to apply it properly.
When in other industries, we have university educators that would be able to speak from a trusted, unbiased perspective where they're not trying to represent any corporate entity. They're just talking about the science itself. But really, we just don't have university level people of the range that they have in other industries to be able to come in. So at this point, a lot of these lawmakers, Jamie was just talking to lawmakers just very recently. A lot of these lawmakers have no choice but to listen to the only people that walk through the door. And those are the guys that get paid by the people with deep pockets.
And there's not a really good historical perspective of the cannabis issue in the legislature. If we discussed on here before, term limits, the issue hasn't come up this way in a while. There's a lot of people proposing changes and stuff. Go ahead, Adam.
And that's why, just from an activist point of view, I can't miss this opportunity. And that's why it's important that if you have the inkling to pick up the phone and make the phone call, to pick up the pen and write a letter, to sit at your keyboard and write a letter, to get off your ass and go make an appointment and go to Lansing and say, hey, I'm your constituent, and here's what I believe. You'd be surprised how impactful the individual is when the legislator hears from a couple.
I would agree with
nobody. A couple
friends with you,
I
would say that the caveat is provided that particular representative or senator isn't already engaged in some kind of a transactional scenario and is going to vote in a particular way, no matter what comes their way.
Correct.
But there are many that are looking for information and will have their minds changed with good evidence that they didn't consider previously.
And I like to remind all these people that personally I'm a one issue guy. So you want my vote, you're going to see it my way, or you're not getting my vote. That's all I got. And after that's the end of the conversation right there most of the time.
I would like to say a special happy birthday to Brian Barger, who just posted a comment to us. Happy birthday, Brian. Great caregiver from the Northeast Lower Peninsula.
Yeah, for his birthday, we took away his permission to share this show.
Yeah. Computers are bizarre. I don't understand, but that's tough love, Brian. Tough love.
Well played.
Man.
Yeah. Skilbo said a great phrase, cahoots. I just love to hear that. And it's so accurate too, because
so is the word skullduggery.
Yeah.
Yes. Although skull smash.
I think of Linder or what's his Linder?
Linder.
When you say skullduggery, just the Linder
Yeah.
image shows up in my brain.
Yeah, it is transactional politics. So go ahead.
This photo's on the definition.
No, I was just going to say I think of skull fucking when I think of
Skull fucking.
Okay.
That's kind of what he's doing there, too.
Right. That's going to be a little tidbit that's cut out and used later on, I'm pretty sure. But,
I'm sure it will.
Many things make Adam think of that, though.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, I commented there was a picture of Dr. Evil on the Renaissance Center or on a very large building the other day, and that very much reminded me of the Photoshop picture of Steve Linder as Dr. Evil, which Crazy George and his people put out on a billboard vehicle. And the fact is, this guy's still out there. He's embroiled in a big controversy right now, Jamie. He really is. He's keeping his head down, but that doesn't mean he's keeping his mouth closed.
We talked about him having some kind of parallel connection to the Chatfield controversy.
Yeah, Lee Chatfield, former Speaker of the House, who's been disgraced in several different ways. Of course, his sexual improprieties. But the most important one was that the accumulation of dark money and the ability to apply it in ways which it's not allowed to be applied. And they're forensically looking at some of his accounts and some of his actions. And as a Republican Speaker of the House, he raised more money than anyone ever had in Michigan's history. And Steve Linder was a part of that. So when they start looking into that whole thing, all of Steve Linder's clients, current and former, should be aware that they're probably going to have a microscope put on their ass because of Stevie.
And like some of the people that have introduced some of the really shitty bills a lot of us have worked against, all of us here have worked against, are connected to this stuff too. Rep. Lilly, as somebody mentioned, to be pretty close, possibly. I mean, there's investigation going on. I'll have to see what happens. It is 420.
It is 420. I will
Have
celebrate.
420.
Cheers, everybody.
And anybody that thought that once we got legalization that we were not going to have anything to work toward, that was kind of unrealistic to expect. There's a lot of work going on right now.
So,
It's funny you mentioned that because we do, all 7 of us here were all at the caregivers at the Capitol that day, and a lot of powerful words were said. And now it's time to see that they stick to that and keep going.
We have legislative partners, Legislative Cannabis Caucus for one, several others. But it's tough being in the minority. It's tough being a group that doesn't have any power and has to work with the people across the aisle all the time. Jamie, you just had a meeting with a representative, right?
I did. We've got more coming up. This is via the Cannabis Caucus.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to talk about that maybe a little bit when we get into 5512. We got other people joining us later on in the show to talk about that, so I didn't really want to jump the gun too much. But you know what? I did want to get to the issue of how failed cannabis gets put knowingly and purposefully back on retail shelves.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yep.
I still am trying to figure that out too.
Well, when their number one thing is safety, and the reason that they can't have any kind of caregiver shit is because nothing is tested, and it's got to pass.
Right.
Well, the weird thing to me is, yes, the judge could say, okay, I've got this really narrow scope to decide in, and I don't give a shit about any of that. This is what I'm saying. That's fine. So then the retested cannabis then comes back into the metric system. The metric system by rule flags that and says it can't go thing, and then we take it from there. I could see that. This specifically was mandated to have a workaround that and to say, yes, it doesn't matter. That can go back on the shelf. And then there were some places that were into that. I kept on saying, you can't do that. And of course, when I said that, I didn't mean like you weren't going to ever to be allowed to do it, all as crazy as it sounds. But even if you can do it, how do you bring yourself to do that? Go ahead.
Wait. I have no problem with the workaround and everything, but how do you do it and not label it?
Well, and that's part of it too, with no particular extra stigma attached to it that it well deserves, right?
Yep, that's good lawyers for you.
I can see the state saying, "Okay, we messed up, we got ourselves in a quandary. Here's how we're going to help ourselves out of it. You can sell the stuff, you just have to list it as, whatever, remediated or failed testing or whatever." Failed second testing. I mean, that doesn't even exist.
No. So for those of us, go ahead, Jamie. But I want to give a rundown of what we're talking about here for people who may not be familiar with the subject. I
was going to tie it into that actually, based on what because you get 2 shots at it, and one of the things that flagged the lab at the heart of the scandal was how, regardless of whether or not it had just failed someplace else, it consistently passed very quickly when it got sent there for its second shot at it without the type of remediation things that we've been discussing here. But go ahead, Rick. Yeah.
What we're really talking about is the Veritas lab scandal here in Michigan, where maybe a national record amount of cannabis was recalled from 2 labs operated by Veritas. A court decision decided that only cannabis from one of those labs should be recalled, and that cannabis from the second lab had to be returned back to the shelves. Now, those cannabis samples were originally tested in August. Those tests were found to be bogus. In November, they were retested and failed. And the order was to put them back on the shelves in December after they had failed, some for even aspergillus, which the MRA claims is one of the most dangerous things you can fail testing for. So when we talk about they put them back on the shelves, the Marijuana Regulatory Agency was forced by a court order to allow tainted marijuana that they knew was dangerous because it failed testing, to put it back on the shelves for sale. And then the retailers didn't have to tell anyone when they bought it. There was nothing on the packaging itself to indicate that. And the victim here in this entire story is not Viridis Laboratories. It's the people who bought cannabis. It's the people who bought that cannabis.
Yep. So if the state had sent samples from each individual store on purpose and made that clear that those samples were from each individual store, all the stuff, and if it would have had the same type of fail rate as all the samples that came from the Lansing store, then all of the cannabis would have stayed off of the shelves. But because the one store wasn't included in the samples sent out to the other labs, that's why all of that stuff could come back on. Yep. To me, though, bypassing the metric or the rules of the department is the thing that takes it to the bizarre level.
The rule that says you can't sell cannabis that failed for these dangerous substances. Now, most of us have smoked tons and tons of cannabis in our life that's never been tested. I love cannabis that's not been tested. I am smoking right now cannabis that has never been tested. But the fact of the matter is, if they set up rules, they have to follow the rules. But if any caregiver had cannabis that tested bad, they wouldn't sell it. They'd do something different with it. You can always cook it down. You can change it into a concentrate. You can take the bad elements out in that way. But to knowingly sell cannabis that had failed a test for no reason other than just to increase your profit margin or to minimize a loss for a financial benefit to yourself.
Well, then it was never about the security of health and testing. That was just a big sham and a smoke screen.
Yeah, destroys confidence in the system.
100%.
Yep. It's difficult now for them to try and talk about the caregiver bills in the legislature as caregiver cannabis is so bad. No, you've just got a whole proof statement here, by the way, which was an international story, that tested cannabis isn't always as good as you might claim it to be. And by the way, the MLive did a story about, I think, 12 or 14 different people that had reported to the Marijuana Regulatory Agency that they had bad reactions to the particular cannabis associated with this particular batch. And when I talk to the Marijuana Regulatory Agency, they tell me they almost never have people reporting any problems with cannabis. So to have that many associated with this particular batch.
Even with previous recalls that never got complaints.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
So everything's about power control, being able to generate revenue, exactly as Andy is kind of suggesting here. I agree. I used to think the same thing, but during the pre-state licensing days, when there'd be a raid of an operation, and you find out that the investigation went on for months, or after knowing that the activity was taking place, and there were then
they just watched it.
Arguments for about how how dangerous this was to have in this area, and then the kids and all that kind of stuff. And meanwhile, they were fine with with operating for several months knowingly. But I have had the opportunity to and we've had them on the show, and we've asked them to ask several labs or people working with labs if around the same time, this is going on with Viridis, the state were to show up for a surprise audit and say, give me the records, give me the incubation temperatures and all the things that went into your processes so we can, match them up with the results of these things. Would you be able to provide that to them? And everybody said yes, no question. And in fact, they have had some kind of audits like that in which they've done that. Mm-hmm. Okay, and that's at part of the situation here. There was all these suspicious. The red flag was all these turnarounds of passing tests, even though they failed someplace else, and they were doing it quickly. And the investigation. Go ahead, Rick.
So just to summarize that, prior to the recall that we're talking about, Viridis, before the recall of the two labs cannabis, Viridis had a reputation in the industry of giving extremely high THC numbers on your test results. We all know that whether accurate or not, people oftentimes use THC as a barometer of quality when it comes to making purchases of cannabis in retail environments. We all know it's not the right way to buy cannabis, but people do that anyway. So there's a market advantage to having extra high numbers. So in addition to that, oftentimes people would have cannabis that failed testing for particular reasons, specifically microbials. And they would have the cannabis retested at Veritas, and it would magically come totally clean
without remediation.
And so people in the industry would say just not possible, just not right. So there were multiple reasons why that particular lab was investigated.
Right.
And
so and I'm sorry. So when the investigation launched, the first thing the state asked Veritas were these records that demonstrated, exactly what happened and what temperature during this process. And they said, "Oh, we don't keep those. We don't have to keep those."
Because the fact is, if you're trying to generate microbes, you have to keep your plate temperature up at a certain level in order to do this. And this is from a layman's perspective. Please don't think that I have a chemistry degree or anything. But if you keep it at a lower temperature, then fewer microbials pop because they're not incubated at the correct temperature. So one way to cheat testing is to keep test temperatures lower inside the incubator, so you generate less. You're less likely to generate microbial action, Jim.
And here's exactly what you were leading to. If you're able to offer higher THC numbers and you're able to pass microbial testing consistently, you're going to get a big chunk of the market, because that's what a lot of that system relies on. And that's what they did. And they had, what was it, 60%, 60 to 70%.
60-70% of the market?
Of the testing market.
They claimed, so
70%.
Yeah, out of those two labs, by the way, there's, 30, 40 labs.
And Susan Fisher was right. I'm going to go back to it real quick. They were already a known problem. They have a pattern of skewing science to get certain results before ever coming into this industry.
So what happened to them? Did they get penalized in it anyway?
The investigation continues. They challenged it right now, and in the courts, they were able to get, as we discussed, a lot of the medicine put back into the system. And they have asked for some type of mediation or arbitration, which the state has said they don't want to be involved in. And the investigation of the state continues. There is some other type of investigation going on. I know, because I've spoken to a national organization. They couldn't talk about this issue because they said they were involved with an investigation with Veritas Labs here in Michigan. So I don't know if it's a federal investigation or their expertise is being called on for the state investigation. I really don't know about that part of it, but an investigation is ongoing.
Well, there's the high THC numbers we talked about. With the
they sued they sued the MRA, and that resulted in where we are right now. But go ahead, yeah.
Exactly right. So the recall itself was about microbial content and doing poor testing for microbials. The second issue we talked about was the extremely high THC numbers. Veritas had developed their own unique technique to determine THC, which was not technically MRA approved. They just tried to change their standard operating procedure to adopt this new style, instead of actually submitting a brand new request for technique. So there are not universal standards for all testing labs to use. This is one of the kind of issues in here. So they came up with what they called the Veritas method, and it could be totally valid, but the problem is it's out of sync because it keeps on getting higher THC.
Every other lab used it, they would have higher numbers too.
Right.
That's right. So you're talking about trying to claim that you have a magic gun in your laboratory that allows you to have better THC results than anybody else, and you just don't want anybody to get a look at your magic gun.
Sounds like you carried an extra one. You know what I mean? Like your math is bad. You want everybody else to just do it wrong too, so we can all be wrong together.
That's it. So there's multiple investigations there, but I can't imagine feds getting involved in bad THC numbers unless there was a collaboration with labs out of state. And I will tell you that similar issues to what we're talking about now have popped up out of states in the West, and specifically the Southwest, with Arizona and New Mexico. So when we're looking at places where maybe this secret lab technique was shared from place to place because they have shared ownership, that could result in federal crimes of collusion.
Look at Andy jumping in there, the Keef on top.
Keef jar sprinkles.
Spark the numbers with some more concentrated versions on top.
There are just so many ways. There's so many ways to. Go ahead, Adam.
Weren't they fined in one of the previous recalls?
They were. They've been subject to fine at least 2 times that I know of, maybe 3 times. But that's, again, it's just indicative of poor laboratory policy and procedure. When they did it at the Michigan State Police Crime Lab, they had nobody to tell them they couldn't do it because they were the top dog. So they broke the rules whenever they wanted to. Now they come outside of that world into the MRA world, and they're breaking rules whenever they want to. So I see a pattern here.
Their pattern actually goes back. I don't want to speak too much about it because there's some ongoing stuff, and there's a lot of suits poised, pointed at Veritas, pointed at the state. There's just going to be a lot more to this before it's all over. So it seems, anyway. I mean, I guess
if justice is served, there will be.
Yeah. And,
is it ever?
The sad part is
it ever? Good point.
But some of this pattern goes on
to continue making money.
Even before Comorn and company discovered the horrible practices and exposed these guys skewing science in order to,
at the state police crime lab,
and get achieved results. There's even some stuff in the history that goes before that also matches this pattern. Let's put it that way. And now they are in this world doing this, and it's essentially, same thing, only different.
Well, again, if you've operated without any consequence for a long time, just like a child, when a child operates without consequence and they continue to do so, expecting their entire life to go without consequence. And then when consequence hits them, they're always surprised. What? Huh?
So Griffin is summing up what we were discussing here a little bit too about how the testing standards work.
Yep. Look, testing's not an exact science, but there's fair practices, which is why there's a regulatory agency to make sure everyone has a level playing field and someone doesn't get an unfair market advantage. When Veritas controls 60%, as they claimed, of the market itself out of just 2 labs in Michigan, wow. Is that not a red flag itself that something's going wrong here? It's not that they just have a kick-ass sales team. They're doing something with their results that grabs everyone's attention.
So I want to say, Theo, I've seen many tests of product from that at a dispensary.
Yeah, of course I have. Sure.
Hopefully they didn't get anyone locked up. Man, a lot of horrible shit happened during the course of that stuff when they were at the police because of this bullshit. Mm-hmm. So there was people's kids taken away. Max Lorenz's son was taken away for 2 years. And they almost didn't want to return him because of the length of time. Yeah. There was a corrections officer that killed himself after being charged with felonies for just using butter. Found that the butter works for his condition.
Yep. Had to hide it because he was a corrections officer. I know, Adam. You have a very hard heart towards police officers, but the fact is, it makes a point, though. Jamie.
This is a dude that worked at a jail or something, man. He was, it wasn't like
the guy's a hypocrite, though.
I don't understand that as adults, we can't just sign a consent form or something that says I knowingly consent to purchase this untested cannabis, and so be it.
You could at one time.
There was one. You could bring it back.
Yep,
that seems logical. I mean, if you want tested cannabis, it seems like
assume that Rick kind of assumed that actually he's like there's a precedent for it. These circumstances fit it. This would be fair for the consumer. But you have to look at the consumer beyond this little technicality in law. There's a health issue here that could be real. I mean. So,
the cost of it is outrageous. Like from a caregiver standpoint, I grow such small batch. I grow, a small batch for one. At most maybe, let's say I have a couple units worth of product. At most, that's like 2, 3, 4 different strains. If I spend an ounce of that for a test, that's one thing. But then there's an additional $400 to $500 for all the other testing. I would happily get my stuff. I'm not worried about the heavy metals because I know what my inputs are, but I would like to know about, some mold testing. I remember when it was only $30 and they would actually give you at least a basic mold
cannabinoid profile.
Yeah, they would give you the cannabinoid profile, and then they would tell you yes or no whether or not you would pass microbial testing.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And you'd at least get a pass or a
fail.
fail.
You're talking about the old days, kind of?
The old days.
That was a site test mainly.
The visual test.
A visual inspection.
They didn't do the trays and shit like that.
And I feel like that visual, like that pass fail microbial visual, isn't even on there anymore.
But if you're caregiver, you got 12 plants. If you're required to test 12 different times because you got 12 different strains, that's cost prohibitive. There's no way you can actually do it. So that the concept of making caregivers test just doesn't work. Plus, with 35,000 caregivers in the state controlling a million plants, give me a break.
The point of reaching out or sourcing a caregiver is to reduce your costs. You know, I love being able to provide an incredibly low cost product for my patients, because I'm really only asking to, you know, for my time, a little bit of my time and whatever my resources are for the product, which on the flip side for them is incredibly low, you know, comparatively to, you know, other states, other industries, or wherever you might want to source. So, I mean, to add in that cost of required testing, you know, I'll get my stuff batch tests here and there. You know, if I have a change in my environment, power goes out, something like that, I'll get my stuff tested. You know, if I know that it's been a heavily rainy month or something like that, I'll get my stuff tested, or, you know, just whatever. If something's been wonky with my setup, I'll get things tested. But otherwise, for the most part, all of my patients are okay with knowing that my cannabinoid levels vary batch to batch, you know, and they all know that and they understand that. And
the fact is, we've had so many millions and millions of pounds of cannabis smoked in Michigan that's not been tested. And with all of the human guinea pigs that we really haven't seen any health-related emergencies concerning cannabis. I mean, and I'm talking about before the regulated market. Forget, you know, prior to 2008.
There are no bodies.
There's no history of it in any state, in anywhere.
Well, California is the one Aspergillus case that is the reason we have testing. So you know what? Here's how it works in this world. There's an acceptable amount of death associated with every substance on the planet. And while I would hope it would be zero for cannabis, if it's truly that one, we'll take it.
Statistically speaking,
Tylenol has a number.
One out of billions is statistically speaking a number approaching zero. That's how we refer to it in math. So, Red, what were you saying? I'm sorry.
Oh, nothing. My point was pretty much made. It was just about, like, you know, the testing requirements for at least a sovereign adult shouldn't really exist, you know, for one to just go and source from his caregiver or their caregiver. Even if I wanted to go to a dispensary and say, do you have any untested cannabis? You know, and they had some cannabis that even failed testing. As an adult, I should be able to just not want to support the waste stream of wasted product. I should be able to ask for failed tested cannabis, you know.
In Michigan,
if I want to make butter or cook something, you know.
We did have a time when the licensed regulated market launched and there were not enough plants and cultivation facilities to be able to supply. And the Marijuana Regulatory Agency allowed caregivers, like many of the people on this particular call, to sell cannabis directly to retailers. And that was a beautiful system. You know why? Because that's what we'd already been doing for so long. The backpack brigade, man. I mean, the fact is, we had at one point 500 unlicensed retail centers here in Michigan, almost 300 of them in Detroit itself. And they were all supplied by caregiver cannabis. And again, no bodies, no health emergencies.
I'd give a shout out to a lot of the shops that existed during those backpack days, because a lot of shops, reputable shops, wanted their caregivers to get their products tested. They wanted test results. They wanted numbers. Granted, maybe it wasn't necessarily microbial and heavy metal testing at the time, but they still wanted some numbers.
The market demanded it, you know, and the stores that didn't have it sometimes got bypassed, you know. That's that's how it worked. You know, Shelley Edgerton, we've said this before, Shelley Edgerton used to be in charge of the department, Lara at the time, when Rule 19 was in effect, when caregivers would throw product in their car, drive it up to the store, and hand it off without any other process involved in it. And there were no issues with that either. Now she was in front of the, you know, giving testimony in the regulatory reform committee about how this is so important, you know, because of the danger of, you know, that happening.
Right.
So
right.
And everyone that bought that cannabis just signed a form.
Under her watch.
Yep.
So we have Brandy Zink coming on.
Dave Crable from MI Hemp just jumped in. Thanks very much, Dave, for being here. Brandy Zink from Americans for Safe Access, the Michigan chapter. Good job, Brandy. Thanks for showing up. Great hoodie she's wearing, by the way.
All right on. I know she wanted to give an update on some stuff with ASA. Yep, there's the famous ASA logo. And talk about a prisoner that we've talked about on this show. We haven't gotten to it yet, but we'll get to it today a little bit, and then later on, hopefully, we'll have a lot more people on. and discuss it at a little bit more in broader terms. And then maybe we can start the discussion, because we're going to get into the 5512 stuff. It was heard in Judiciary Committee today, and we'll be joined by some other people too who were there to help report on that. Anyway, Brandy, chair of the Michigan chapter of Americans for Safe Access, how you doing?
Great. Thank you all. Nice to see everyone. Thank you for having me on. I'm excited about there's news coming out tomorrow about the ASA State of the State report, and we have our monthly chapter meeting is tomorrow. Join us on the Facebook Live at 7 to 8:30 tomorrow evening.
Which Facebook page can it be found on, Brandy?
The Michigan Americans for Safe Access chapter page.
That's what it's called, Michigan Americans for Safe Access chapter.
Is it MI ASA or something like that?
I believe it's MI ASA. Yeah. And we also have a Facebook group too. So we try to send out the word as far and wide as we can. We have an email list as well. If you join ASA, and you'll actually get the link for the live presentation that the ASA National is going to go over the State of the State report and how they did their grading system. You'll find out how Michigan did. How did Michigan do on from an A through a B, C, D, or if you failed, because many states are failing. Thinking about patient-focused issues and how that it's important when we're talking about policy that we don't let the adult use and the other uses be taking more advantage. That we need to remind our legislators that patients really do depend on this for their life, and it's their medicine, and it could be literally a life or death situation. So lots of stuff going on, and I can't wait to have our chapter meeting where we've got lots of local activists who are working very hard on local ordinances and trying to fight the war on caregivers and really doing a lot of hard, awesome work. So looking forward to hear their updates and how we can organize and get the boots on the ground so that we can, as a team, show up where we need to be. So excited about that and hear about the new State of the States report, where we fit in the whole picture of the all 50 states and how the federal government is what's got to change. And the power that we have as this large state with a successful cannabis program. No state has a perfect score, so we can always improve, and there's more. So please, if you go to the safeaccessnow.org, you can join ASA and you can get the link to see the State of the States report tomorrow at 3 p.m. Or you can join our ASA chapter meeting tomorrow at 7 p.m. A big ASA day.
Nice.
Well, of course, that State of the States report really grade states A through E on the different levels of cannabis.
And they've gotten more strict for this year.
Sure. Well, they should.
They've added some new criteria, keeping in mind things like affordability as part of access. And they've added a penalty section as well. So you have to download the report when you get the link after you join ASA. And then you'll get to see the live report early, and you'll see all of the criteria. One of the things that's really great, that why activists are the ones to see this report first, is because it's an important tool that we can use in our advocacy when we're talking to our state, local, and federal legislators about what access looks like, and this is what we need. And it's an important tool for them to see the metrics of where we're doing great and where we really need to be improved.
Good deal. And of course, when you're looking at national perspective, like Americans for Safe Access has, it's always important. We forget exactly how good we have it in Michigan, but also it's nice to see how we stack up with specific issues. Are we doing better than others in social equity? Are our hurdles, barriers to entry, are they too high? How do we stack up to other states? It's one of those important things we can use to decide where to fix the program.
Yeah, Absolutely. One of the costs of being a patient too, when they think about, oh, well, we have a program, we have to look at are the fees, reduced fees for disabled or veterans for getting a medical marijuana card. Some states you have to get it, multiple times over the course of a year. Some states have extra fees, the doctor's fees. You have to keep going to the doctor and getting doctor certified over and over. So there's all these extra different layers of costs. It's not just the cost of whether the affordability in the dispensary. There's extra costs. So they evaluate the states based on some of those items for affordability.
You mentioned a short time ago about municipal rules changing to disadvantage caregivers. I know that we've got a lot of people here that feel strongly about this issue. Really, we're talking about an access issue, not just for patients, but for anyone that wants cannabis in their community. A community that hates caregivers, people who are dedicated to helping patients with their medical use of cannabis. When a community hates those people, they hate everybody, right? It's a terrible thing to do.
Well, we, as advocacy groups all around, I think that we need to do education, not just on the policymakers, but in our own community, and have the good neighbor examples of how we can be good neighbors. Odor and nuisance problems, well, that is a problem, and we can do things better. We can teach people about filters. I propose to, all this funding that they get from taxation and through the fees and licensing, why don't they make a publicly available education for how to use these filters and give them away, like they give away smoke alarms, and other safety equipment. There's all kinds of ideas of things that, we can work on. That's why I like working on the ASA chapter with people from all over the state. We are doing the best we can, but when we're under the umbrella working together, we have sister organizations. We love you, MiNORML. We love you. We're all in this big, beautiful movement. And I belong to multiple organizations, and I'm happy to build alliances and bridges. We did a lot of hard work together in the fall because the caregiver bills were so urgent. And I'm really proud of all the work that we've done, but there's a lot more that we don't know that's coming if we're not organized, and we have the tools now with the ASA report that's coming out. It's a brand new tool. It'll be very useful for you in your advocacy. So I'm promoting the State of the States report because it is such a great thing every time it comes out. ASA is celebrating their 20th years of advocacy, and we have a lot to thank them for, but ASA wouldn't exist without you as the members. That's who we are. So grateful to everyone here for all the work that you've done. We're working together. I know that we're going to hear more about, like Jamie, talk about the 5512 and the work there in the hearing today.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Hang on a second, Jamie. But safeaccessnow.org, in addition to the State of the States report, safeaccessnow.org has lots of resources for people to be able to use, talking points, fact sheets, things they can print out and take with them when they go to talk to local community leaders. MiNORML.org has the same thing too, but we're talking about ASA.
This is very patient focused, and MiNORML would expand out to all consumers. Yeah.
Right.
Well, keeping a patient focus is one of the reasons why I do love working with ASA, that we've been able to look at the medical research. There's continuing medical education credits, so we can have education for our doctors and nurses and other home care providers. They need that information, so we're working hard to try to get that information out to the actual medical practitioners, that they need to know about the endocannabinoid system. They need to know about the different cannabis therapies, methods and dosing, all of those things. So looking forward to, we have a new alliance with the Midwest Canna Nurses. We'll be working on doing direct education towards medical professionals in Michigan.
Good deal.
So I know it wasn't on the agenda, but it's another exciting development that we need to not just think of policymakers, I guess, when we're doing our advocacy, that education is not being done in the doctor's office. There are not enough physicians who are well versed enough to not just recommend it, but help patients through their healing journey. It's a lack of science, and I know that there's money out there, lots of money to be made perhaps on cannabis, and that's all fine and good, but I want the science to be out there, and all the resources are there for the medical side. And then there's a whole policy track if you want to dive deep into how the sausage is made on Capitol Hill. We have a whole section research on the ACES site with that information. We also offer continuing education credits and training for laboratories and processors, cultivators, for retail, and that's through the patient focused certification. So all of that's on the safeaccessnow.org site.
So Brandy, you wanted to kind of like announce a status of friend of ours.
Yes. There are prisoners who were in federal prison under the federal law. We still need to change federal law, and if you're state compliant, that doesn't guarantee that you will not ever face federal charges. So there are some folks in Michigan who have been incarcerated, and they took the hits. Ryan Bazor, redemption, he served his time. So there's another patient and caregiver family man from Lenawee County in Monroe, Michigan area. And he was served, I think he was 9 out of 10 years. And it's Jerry Duvall has been released. And why I'm bringing this up is because we need to help the people who put their time behind bars, and not everyone is going to be able to be, well, how could you ever be okay again? And it takes a lot for re-entry for folks. They need prisoners returning citizens need financial support. They need mental health support. They need housing. Some may need childcare, etc. So when you think about social equity and those things, think about that. But especially when you see the GoFundMe for Jerry Duvall, please be kind and help fund the GoFundMe when you see that.
Is it already out, or
No,
are we
I haven't
expecting
seen
it to come out? Okay.
But it should be coming. But also keep in mind in the larger picture of the victims of the war on drugs, and re-entering citizens need help. They need financial help. They need housing. They need safe mental health care. And actually, they need to get reintegrated into the system. So I would love to see some of that social equity money going towards programs when you're getting your marijuana license, that they would go towards that to help the people who are, you're basically standing on their shoulders and becoming millionaires and beyond on the backs of these men and women who serve time away from their families, and the tragedy of their children being separated. And it's why many of us keep fighting, is to keep everyone else out of harm's way. That this is a damn drug war, and they lock people up, and it destroys families and lives. And I think of a Rudy Gammo, and every holiday, and you think about they spend away. We just had, the New Year and Christmas, but now Valentine's Day and all these some sacred holidays too. People, separated from the time when you should be home with your families. So we're not going to forget our prisoners and returning citizens when they come home, and their families need support too. So please fund those projects, like the Great Lakes Expungement Network and other projects. And when you see the call for GoFundMe for helping Jerry Duvall and other returning veterans of the drug war.
Right.
Along those lines, I'd like to say Maurice Shoemate will be getting out of jail tomorrow. Michigan Cannabis Freedom Coalition has helped to get Maurice out and also to provide a safer or a more comfortable reentry with a reentry grant. Any of the corporate entities out there that might be watching and want to figure out how they can participate in what Brandy just discussed, a contribution to Michigan Cannabis Freedom Coalition itself is directly benefits those families. We gave money to folks so they would have a Christmas this year because their family members in jail. I'll also say too, the Jerry Duvall case itself is pretty tragic. It's a long one. It's documented. You can Google it. And I was given a great opportunity to attend a screening of a new movie produced about Michael Thompson's time incarcerated. It's about 25 minutes long. I was there with Michael and family members and a small group of people at his home to watch it. It was moving. It's a touching thing. To be involved in people's lives as they come out it's a gift. It's a gift that you can give your fellow human beings.
We discussed the Jerry Duvall story here pretty extensively with a lot of people who were involved. And at one point, Rick and I went to the appeals court in Cincinnati to hear about an appeals, and his case is really fucked up. And so ultimately, is the story, even though he's out, he went through a lot of hell. He was in need of medical attention, and he didn't, as you might imagine, he didn't, get very well taken care of based on all the medical needs that he had. He was in a specific prison, I guess that's supposed to.
Yeah, he's a transplant patient, so he had multiple things too. It would be remiss for us to not draw attention to the fact that Adam Brook himself spent a couple years behind bars for the cannabis plant too, and his.
That's why I started crying. I saw Adam's face while I was talking.
I know it's
and
tough.
For all the
tough
victims and prisoners being locked in a cage. I honor anyone who returns home to us.
And that's true. And that's
love you, Adam.
That should be spotlighted. And another and we'll have maybe many of the people that we've had on before concerning Jerry, Carrie Boyder, and Stacy, and
when the family's ready.
Jerry's mother, when they want to come on and talk about it, maybe when they launch the GoFundMe and that kind of stuff. But man, so just one more. I don't know if everybody knows some of the particulars about this case, but I'll just say about the Jerry Duvall case. It had to do with the multi-jurisdictional task force and how sometimes when there's a particular unit and there's members of different agencies and departments involved, they are sometimes deputized to be federal agents under certain circumstances, and then otherwise their regular role as a deputy or whatever it is. So in this case, you had a law enforcement person show up as like a part of the sheriff's department, county, and actually discuss about how properly under state law to have the garden. It was like a greenhouse. They're farmers and everything. Anyway, they had these
to keep it out of view and other
how it's supposed to be separated or whatever they told him, and they complied. He came back later, as a federal agent and arrested him. He's in federal prison, and he's part of one of these stories of when somebody decides that they really want to fight, when they really want to get in front of a jury and explain how the state says we can do this, and and that kind of stuff, and how the feds don't like that. When you fight,
the system punishes people that fight back.
A very high rate of conviction. That's because they tee it up for that to be the case, and if you fuck around, it's worse. That's one of the reasons why they're able to tee it up so often, because people want to avoid it being worse.
And Jerry's a transplant patient. He's had I forget which one or two of his organs he's had transplanted. And for the rest of your life as a transplant recipient, you have special medical needs that are required. You think that they accommodate special medical needs in jail? No, they don't. So that itself, in addition to the incarceration, takes a toll on the human. There are so many things that need to be reformed in America. We can talk about building cars and roads and all the rest of that stuff too. We have to fix our prison system before we fix anything else.
It's suffering at that point. You know what I mean? That's not just retribution at that point.
Yeah. Neglect. It's willful neglect. They treat everyone like they're a number. They don't care about your specific needs. They don't care about anything.
This can go on for years, though. You know what I mean? Like,
well, it's part part of the problem is that it becomes a budgetary issue too. So you have to understand that the largest part of the Michigan state budget, $2 billion, goes to the prison system.
So they cut corners on food.
That being
and
said, that they do everything they can to try to save money.
Well, the funny thing is, if you figure out how much it costs for each prisoner, you know what I mean? Let's say you take that budget and you figure there's 40,000 people incarcerated or some number like that. And you say, well, holy shit, they're supposed to be getting like $20,000, annually per prisoner. And then you ask that prisoner, do you feel like they're giving you $20,000 worth of services and your cut of the budget? And the answer is no.
Yeah. Of course, the prison system itself has an administration that's bloated and been around for a long time. They tried to privatize prisons, but what they found out is that it really just led to more people being abusive. And as Adam very aptly mentioned, when the dollar sign is the most important thing that you care about, not the dignity of the human being or the potential for them to be rehabilitated and come back into society doing better, when all you care about is the dollar sign, you get atrocious conditions and you don't rehabilitate. You just make people hate the system even more.
Wasn't there a famous letter to the governor about a proposed private company that may have bring their system to Michigan, and it required a certain consistent percentage of occupancy?
Yeah, that's how they do the private prison system.
Yeah, you have to have this filled 80% or whatever it is at all times. So
I've saw
videos out there. You'll find them.
Prisons at one point said that they had people that were less heavy, less weighty, so they could justify giving them less calories per day, because that's how they measure how much you got. You're entitled to a certain number of calories per day. But if you're not as fat, if you're smaller, then you get to eat less. That was their justification. I don't think that was successful, but that's just an example of what the prison system tries to do to people that are inside in order to, as Adam mentioned, cut corners and save money. One of the real problems we have is that we destroyed the mental health institutions here in the United States of America. We used to keep people who were just a little bit off, give them some help, and now we don't. And they turn into criminals, not because they intend to, just because their behavior is out of whack.
You could see a direct change. I wasn't there at the time, but I talked to guys that were, and you could see a direct change in the prison system overnight when they closed, when Engler closed the mental institutions in Michigan, because guys were now being picked up for petty crime. And after 2-3 petty crimes, they were being sent to state prison. And basically when I was there, everybody was on some sort of psychotropic drug. And it was a low-level mental institution is really what it was.
You're talking about when they had Reagan cut the bottom out of the whole system and he cut everybody loose from.
Got rid of all the mental institutions.
Yeah, man, that's a real fucking shame, because you're right, it is full.
Yeah. And it's I went to prison. I was in prison with guys who had done 20, 30 years and were on their way out. So the low-level prison I was in, most of these guys were on their way out the door within 2-3 years. And I talked to guys that told me about an era where I wouldn't have minded being there. I mean, they had, steak once a week and fried chicken once a week. And, they had a commissary that was open every day that you could go grab whatever you had money for. And it wasn't the aspects of life weren't punitive. The food wasn't a punishment. The lifestyle was such that you could get educated and learn something and come out better than you went in. Now it's not that at all. And people don't care either, because for the most part, it doesn't affect them. And the people it does affect, they're just trying to get through it with $3 a minute phone calls.
Whenever a prison is proposed to be closed, everybody talks about how it's a job loss, and they want to stay open because it's a job creator. Well, fact is, if they're not doing right by the prisoners themselves, then they probably shouldn't be in that game. You should probably take that away from them. But I think we talk about all the different things we need to do in order to create jobs. Let's reopen those mental health facilities. Let's reconnect with people and make sure that they get some of the the assistance they need in order to move forward. We have a lot more tools now to be able to successfully help people than we did 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
But they're still just shoving pharmaceuticals at them.
Amen
though.
to that, Rick.
That's true too, but there's also like a drove of people who have been leaving the mental health field because of the issue of too many people in your caseload, and there's more people that need mental health shit right now than probably in any time in the last 100 years. And so you come into an issue again, as Adam said, with funding. Where is this money going to come from? Because they're not going to take it away from, we got to protect the people. We've got to make sure that we've got a lot of bars and a lot of police. Adding to the police force has never been like a good thing for reducing crime and increasing wellness in a community.
If you're trying to use your police force to generate revenue by creating traffic tickets and generating money that way, then greater police translates directly into greater money. And that's just a tragic thing. That's one of the things they've talked about. Our police force needs to generate more, so we're going to hire more. Generate some more safety, solve some crimes.
Well, I just seen the thing that gets me is like in the 1990s, when, if you look historically, was the highest time for crime, and that's when the crime bills were signed by Clinton and everybody else, right? So the prison population at that point, was 1 million people. Okay, and if you look at the number now, it's crested over 2 million people. Why is that? If these things have been beneficial, especially when you think about how in the past people used to do like Buck Rogers time, a whole boatload of it, and now with the revolving door prison systems where people have the minimum sentences and things like that, they've really created where if they get that money, I was talking about that $20,000 in every single person. Well, if you hold that bed up for 20 years, you're only going to get that same 20,000. But if you keep cranking people through the door and you can fill that bed 2-3 times a year, that's money, baby.
It's like a hotel that always wants to keep their rooms rented,
Exactly.
The state's very own Red Roof Inn. We'll keep a light on for you.
Yeah, I don't know.
The system is designed for recidivism.
Yeah.
The system is booking.com.
The drug testing on probation with drug testing. Somebody's making some money there.
I know we're going to talk about 5512 later, but yeah, I mean, the fact that we're even treating cannabis as something that should be a concern anymore, it's an archaic thing. We passed legalization.
We're going to get into that, and I hope that Trish joins us. She was there with Amy Carter today, and they did give some testimony. They also gave me kind of a report on the way back. But I know that you have some thoughts on 5512, Brandy. You kind of wanted to address that. Maybe let's get started with that conversation, and hope that Trish joins us. If it's not, I'll try to relay the report of their experience as given to me by them later on. But it would be cool if she can join us. There are some doctor's appointments and stuff like that she's waiting to get done with before being able to come on.
Well, I actually haven't heard much news about it because I didn't attend the hearing in Lansing, so I'm eager to hear from someone who's there how it went down. But I submitted a letter on behalf of the Americans for Safe Access Michigan chapter in opposition to 5512. In essence, how can a judge practice medicine from the bench? It's punitive. It's punishing patients. It's not taking into account that people who use medical cannabis have a modified doctor-patient relationship, and they need this medication because it's there's something they use to treat an ailment or medical condition. For many people, it's a matter of life and death. And I think, well, who the hell is a judge to tell you whether you can use your blood pressure medicine or your insulin or any other medication that you use to live? How can they withhold any medicine from you that your doctor prescribes for you?
Yeah, they still view it as one of the dangerous substances that they should be concerned about in the drug court, and that's one of the inappropriate potential results of this legislation.
It's cruel and unusual punishment. It's clearly punitive, and I reminded them that the Medical Marijuana Act has been supported 63% of the voters. Is pretty loud and clear. So you haven't asked the people. We'd like the work group, please, because the last round where we went to lobby with legislators, one of the things that we said, hey, stop, you didn't talk to any of us. You're going to hurt a lot of people. And a lot of patients and a lot of caregivers really did speak out. And because of that unity we had through using every vehicle we have with coalitions of groups, we all stand together against the bills that are going to take away caregiver rights. And that was a great call to action. So I want to help reinvigorate the call to action, say, hey, there's more going on, and we're going to have to be ever vigilant and work together. 5512, we've written an opposition letter because of the harm that it would do to patients. And I asked them, give us the work group where you include patient and caregiver voices.
So that sounds just about right. I know the Cannabis Caucus sent out a letter. It was based around exposing the fact that they wanted to do, I think as Rick phrased it, a legislative end around to the Toohey case. And we think the Toohey case was correct, and that that was a pro-patient right decision. Hey, Spartan joined us. I think this is a full house.
Latrisha's with us too. So
Latrisha's joined us. And yes, thank you guys for joining us. And this is the max that we can have on this platform. But it's all good. It's perfect. And we're just jumping into the 5512 discussion, Spartan.
Oh, nice. Very nice. 5512. What happened today on that?
Well,
Latrisha was there.
And do you want to give any fill-in information, Rick, or anything like that, just to set the stage, or are we good to keep on with this conversation?
No, we have some television audience that is not going to understand when you say 5512 what that means. So let's clarify that. House Bill 5512 would propose to change the drug court in the state of Michigan to give judges the ability to say yes or no as to whether or not a medical patient, a registered cannabis user, can use their medical marijuana while on parole, probation, or in the drug court itself. The reason they're trying to do this is because we recently won a victory in 2021 in a case called People v. Toohey, where they challenged the judge denying him this use of medical marijuana on probation, went to the Michigan Supreme Court, and it won. So the drug court really has no basis in law to tell someone that they can't use their medical cannabis. However, they're still doing it anyway. And this particular bill, 5512, would basically codify their defiance, which I think I wrote in our letter for Cannabis Caucus. It would codify the drug courts thumbing their nose at the People v. Toohey decision from the Supreme Court and giving them the ability to say no to people who want to participate in drug court while still use medical marijuana.
And then we go on to point out how it can actually be used as a harm reduction vehicle to help people with those dangerous substances that the court should be concerned with. And Latrisha was there. She's very knowledgeable and on top of all these different perspectives and angles. And it would be good if you let us know how things went.
Okay, so we went in today just to kind of find out what the spiel is going to be. We didn't talk too much about it. I think there was one judge that was speaking about his concerns about basically what's the right choice to make, when it's okay and when is it not okay. So that's the whole case-by-case scenario that they're talking about. What they want to do is make it a case-by-case scenario, from what I understand. It wasn't that clear in the bill when I was reading it, but that is what he testified anyway. And long story short, there's already been a clarification by the Department of Justice already that specifies that it can be a case-by-case situation. So there's just really no reason for them to amend the Medical Marijuana Act or the Constitution at all for a federal program that already has a clarification for it. So we went in an angle as this is discriminatory. The state of Michigan funds drug courts just as much as the federal government does. So at this point, I honestly feel like it's not going to pass the committee. There was a lot of people out there that had a lot of questions about it. You know how you can feel the room when they're kind of, just being very dismissive and whatnot. But in this case, I could be wrong, but a lot of them had a lot of questions, and I'm pretty sure it has a lot to do with everybody writing in. They had talked about somebody who had called was talking about the fact that they had LeGrand. I think maybe Jamie, you spoke to him, and he had brought up the concerns, and there's never been an efficacy program that shows, there's no data that actually shows whether drug court is actually a positive thing other than people that actually come out of it. And there's only a small amount of number of people that do make it through there. And another example that I had spoken to them about, Wayne County has over 44,000 medical marijuana patients, and they have the best drug court system, apparently. And to take almost out half of a county not being able to go into drug court would be, pretty discriminated. So at this point, that's pretty much all I have. Other than that, we'll just have to pay attention to what happens next weekend or next Tuesday.
Yeah. So you're when you bring up LeGrand, that was one of the lawmakers, and so a few groups have sent out letters saying we're in opposition, and we've pointed out these things like we want you to codify the Toohey case, not
right.
Not try to figure out a way to get around it. We don't need to know where the line is. The line is if somebody has their card.
Right.
Big win for medical marijuana patients' rights. And we think that instead of it just being a court case, it should actually, be put into the law through the legislative process instead of this effort to sort of, as we describe it, end around. And Trish, today was just the first hearing. There'll be a second hearing when they'll probably take a vote on it. And we believe that hearing is next week. Is that correct?
Well, let's just say we assume so, but these things come in and out so quickly. It's not even been listed on the judiciary board right now. So
I want to get back to Rep. LeGrand. He was one of the co-sponsors. This is a bipartisan supported bill, and this is one of these things where it's not all because of ill intent. This is an easy one to confuse people with, and they did that. But
federal funding. It was all about federal funding. Right. Every time I talked to somebody, or every time I talked to a representative, a lot of it was their concern about losing their funding from the federal government.
Which doesn't
for a court system that hasn't proven itself above and beyond anything else. That's what I find so interesting, is that this is a money grab once again by the state of federal dollars, so that they can have this court system, and they don't really care what the outcome is, because in the end, the outcome is no different than the other court system, but now they got someone else paying for it.
Yeah.
I find that the irony of judges trying to influence lawmaking as opposed to judges being just, impartial adjudicators of the law given to them by the people. I find that's so, Sequence is nodding. He knows what I'm talking about. It just doesn't seem like that's their role, right?
I'm more confused on this bill. Usually there's a clear reason and you can see reason behind it, but what's the point of this bill? Where's the harm that this bill is fixing?
They don't want to have
they lose control over telling somebody they can use cannabis or not if they have their medical marijuana card.
Well, the people of the state have already decided on that issue, and I don't understand why that's. They're still considering cannabis to be one of the dangerous substances that they need to be concerned. Well, so if that's the case, that's what you need to attack. They don't like
losing control. The judges didn't want to hear it. They're not doctors. They're not medical professionals. They don't really respect this law. I think if they did, they wouldn't have this perspective. And they're pushing this, and they don't want to budge. They think, where's the line? If it's of course. So that's where we got to in their minds, the negotiation, which was, well, if it's severe enough or significant enough, or whatever the language is. Then
they said there was one person that they think that they've had a problem with. One.
Okay. But there's an established law saying that it's medicinal cannabis. I'm going to say cannabis. I refuse to say. So medicinal cannabis. And so just that alone, a judge would have to agree that the law is saying that cannabis is medicinal. Well, if the law is saying cannabis,
and we had that ruling too from the Supreme Court, and that's what they're in their minds. They called it too. Robbins reported to me that some of the discussions that they've had, they think it's quote unquote unintended consequences. The Toohey decision is going to cause them some problems. They've got to do something about it. That's what this is all about.
What I'm saying, the avenue, the way that I would attack it would be is I would further that line of reasoning is now if the law is saying that it's medicinal, how can you then sit there as a judge saying that you are medicinally trained and can make a decision on this?
exactly. Yeah, we did discuss that earlier too, and that's exactly correct, man. They're not medical professionals. They're not that individual's doctor, which is what they actually need to qualify as in order to be in on that conversation.
Maybe one of you guys can answer this question, but I'm obviously don't know it, so I'm going to throw it out there. So let's say, for example, somebody is qualified or can go through drug court. But just to say, for example, they are, an addict and they do go to prison or they do go to jail and they don't choose drug court. How is the treatment done in court? Or excuse me, when they are in jail, are they still going through a rehabilitation program? Are they still going to get treatment? Is it, do they just go in there and get sick and
NAAA probably at the most
they wean you off immediately.
Yeah. I was told by someone
you just struggle.
Yep,
So
just the other day that
they fucked up for me. I mean, I'll tell my story real quick. So I went from the courthouse to the Oakland County Jail. I spent 5 days in a medical unit there. I was on like 180 milligrams of methadone and for pain. And they actually had my wife bring up my medication to the jail so that it could be given to me by a doctor. I was checked on every 20 minutes. I was in a glass booth and alone. Within 5 days, they had me on a bus to the state prison. When I rolled into the state prison, they immediately lowered my dose to 60 milligrams, which is protocol for stepping you down from methadone. So I saw what was happening literally the day I got there. However, they fucked up and it took them 3 months before they ever started to lower my dose. And then it took them 3 months to step me down off of that 60 milligrams. So for the first 6 months, they were giving me opiates every day or methadone every day.
And I mentioned that too.
And the reality is it was because I was on such a high dose. Most people that go in dope sick don't get that type of treatment for illicit drugs.
Yeah. Just a shame. It's a shame that the first thing we do is we dehumanize people. Go ahead, Trish.
That's one of the things I brought up in front of the committee itself too. Is like, a lot of people who are medical marijuana patients actually do use this to help with the recovery program. So you should be thanking them.
Well, it's harm reduction.
Why these people are in jail with you right now is because of the drugs that you are allowed to have.
Us pain patients shouldn't suffer because of dope fiends. Okay. I happen to like opiates. I get a great deal of relief from opiates. I can take an opiate in the morning and do pretty good for most of the day. And should I actually lift anything heavy and cause any damage to my back, I can increase my usage and get through the couple days that I need to. But instead, I live a holy hell because dope fiends have destroyed the system that should be taking care of medical patients. So I'm not surprised that the same group of people are going after the cannabis patients.
You're saying that people who really need it aren't getting it because of all the abuses.
You can't get it at all.
But it's not just dope fiends. It's the system tried to take
but
advantage
it was only because
and
of the
make
dope
as much money as
it was only because of the people
people are susceptible to becoming that if it gets handed to them in the ways and the
Well, I think we need to. I encourage everyone to when they talk to these policymakers and things like that to just bring up the fact that cannabis is a gateway drug. It's a gateway off of drugs. It's a way to step you off of that track and to get you out of that situation. And it should be embraced more rather than shunned. I mean, it's insane that it's that old rhetoric is still being pushed and we're still hearing it when there's
the drug court owes it to the people who are most desperately in need to be up to date.
100%. I mean, it's a tool. It's a tool to help the people, and don't let a doctor tell you that there's no studies showing the bullshit. Go on Google Scholar anytime and any time of the day and put cannabis as medicine, and you're gonna get. I think last time I did it, it was over 3,000 results. So there's plenty of white papers, plenty of studies to look at.
So as
let them tell you that.
As the director of advocacy for the Botanical Company, I sent a letter of opposition to the committee, and I included about 6 or 7 articles about studies and articles about harm reduction.
So awesome. I'm going to give you all a great resource right now. This is going to sound weird, but you got to do what I say. Granny Storm Crow's List. You Google Granny Storm Crow's List. This is a compendium.
Been around forever.
It sure has it, and it aggregates all of the medical studies done all across the world on the cannabis plant and how it interacts with people. And importantly, Granny Storm Crow's List breaks it down by illness. Okay, so you don't have to sort through. If you're trying to look just for emphysema, if you're trying to look for how it helps mend bones or how it affects pregnancy, you have all the information right there. Whenever someone says there's not enough data on, there's not been enough studies on cannabis, I always try to bring this up, but the name is just off-putting to people. But put it right in your Google search engine, Granny Storm Crow's List.
And so I asked Becca Newman is one of the independent researchers who also started this the harm reduction project that we've discussed on here at Wayne State for this information. She sent me over a lot of very specific harm reduction and most recent studies that I was able to include. And of course, we had Pamela Lynch before from Harm Reduction Michigan on here. That was another popular discussion and show. And we're going to have the guy that started the project at Wayne State next week. And so to discuss it again, all those have been, just wanted to throw that in there since we were getting there in this discussion. And it's just, it works. It's part of my personal testimony. I mean, and heard it a lot when I was working more in the stores and stuff.
Cannabis is the very best tool for harm reduction when it comes to alternative substances. People underestimate the way cannabis can substitute for alcohol in someone's life and steer them away from something. I know a lot of people who use cannabis in their life because my dad was a drunk. Well, if cannabis didn't exist and you only had alcohol to lean to, it would either be alcohol or you'd be on something incredibly hard. But now you're a wonderful person who loves children and pets dogs, and it's because cannabis is in your life instead of that genetic marker for addiction that snagged your entire family and put them as alcoholics. I mean, the way that the way it heals is just amazing. So that's why we need to embrace it to a greater degree in our society. I think when you look at the international trade in cannabis, you're seeing that the business community certainly has normalized cannabis, and they're trying to profit from it just like they profit from any other commodity, like mangoes or papaya or aluminum, right? They're just in line to make money. So internationally, we're at a threshold. We're like at the base of the Rainbow Bridge of Asgard. We're moving towards a place where we don't have any criminality anymore. And it's all these individual fights like Latrisha made today, all the individual dialogues and the conversations that we have. Those are the steps that we make as we cross the bridge. Got to continue to do it.
And Trisha and Amy have continued to do a lot of work in the legislature and on behalf of a lot of of course, Jaden's bill, which is a positive bill. We don't talk about that often. Of course, doesn't have.
Is that still in committee, or has that come out of committee? It was the education committee last I looked.
It's still there, but I don't think it's going to come out.
It's an education and regulatory reform. I think it has to. You have to change. You have to change 2 areas of law in order to make it work.
Trish, you said not going to come out until.
Hornberger is not really responding, hasn't in a long time, and she's actually looks like she's moving over to the floor, the pro tempore, and so it looks like we might have a little bit of a shift with that situation. The sponsor for that bill too also is going to be transferring into another position as well. So we've been talking to a lot of regulators about it. We do have a lot of people who are actually for it, but we have to have some, I guess I would say, we need to get some more sponsors. So we need to have some education programs who are willing to stand with Amy and Jaden's bill to, of course, approach the education program, because it is, I'm sure.
Even if it fails, I think it's a worthwhile one to pursue as a ballot proposal, because I think if it got to a public vote, it would pass it would easily pass. It's just a matter of getting it on there.
Just to explain to our viewers what Jaden's bill is, Jaden's bill would allow students in K through 12 situations to be able to use medical marijuana in a non-smokable form if recommended by physicians. And they would allow that to be distributed by school officials in the same way that the school officials distribute other licensed pharmaceuticals like inhalers and regular drugs. So that would be the proposal here in Michigan. We do have about 300 pediatric patients registered under the program. So it's something that would be a real world effect. It would certainly affect a
the
lot
real
of kids.
reason, the need, not to step on you, but the real need for it, just for layman's terms on this, is the situation is you may have a child that it will say stops seizures.
Epilepsy, yes. That's what I was thinking.
And you have to give your child maybe some cannabis oil to keep a nice dose in their body at all times so that it can keep that suppressed. Right now, if that's the case in Michigan, not only do you have to get 2 doctors to recommend just to get your child their medicine, but then when you want to administer that medicine, you can't even do it on school grounds. You have to go pick up your child, total interruption from their day, take them, is it 1,000 feet? There's a certain amount of feet, 1,000 feet away, and then give them the medicine to drive them, turn around and drive them right back and go. It's just absolutely ridiculous. Insane.
I wonder if they do the same thing for
like drug-free school zone was used as the basis for the
Skilbo. What were you saying?
I said, I wonder if they make people do that for Ritalin or for Xanax or anything else that they would, reliably be a controlled substance.
Ritalin all day.
A school nurse or some administrator or somebody, hands it out just on
Such
schedule.
a discriminatory thing then. Yeah, I completely understand.
Trust the doctor. Yeah.
Once again, federal school zone is a money grab.
And of course, just
in what way do you mean? In the punitive way of them being able?
Yeah,
to
that's what. If you get caught in that zone, you pay more, and it's
Right.
harsher offense.
But they don't have to. They don't have to turn them into federal school zones. They choose to do that. That's something that the state agreed to do.
City of Detroit, of course, has a much more liberal interpretation of school zone, and they've got a definition that includes things like parks and churches and home-based daycare.
Yeah, daycares. From a residence, which really throws it off. Yeah.
Each individual community adopts a different standard, but the point being that when getting back to Jaden's law, the point is that it's pretty clear that this is a hardship, especially in Michigan when the winters are so crazy. But as a student, as a child in school, you don't want to be different from the other kids because that's an opportunity for them to treat you poorly. So when you have to get pulled out of class and taken out by mom, once a day or a couple times a week, or after there's been an episode, instead of just having a smooth thing like other children have, a smooth relationship with the school nurse that gets the meds that they need. And nowadays, most medicines can be dispensed in pill form or in tincture form. So simple.
I'm seeing an issue too, is you're basically just passing off the problem onto the parent. You're saying, well, you can't use it in a car and you can't be within 1,000 feet of a park. And I'm telling you, on a park thing, all of us here have probably at some point consumed cannabis in a park. So, I mean,
not me, Skilbo.
Dude, I go to all the parks and just burn down.
Right, it's illegal, right? That's where I go now.
To be honest, what scares me the most and what my heart goes out to these parents is, we've all, maybe we haven't all seen, but a lot of us have seen the video of a child seizing, and then after the administration of this, completely stop. God forbid a child starts seizing in school. Are you supposed to take a seizing kid out of the school, go 1,000 feet before you can give them medicine? I mean,
it took demonstrating that very thing.
But I'm not going to listen to your damn ass. You're going to make me a felon right there. And
it took demonstrating that very thing in front of a lawmaker years ago to get one of the first bills introduced to be able to administer certain time, because that time there was a question about the oils and stuff like that, and we're like, what do you want to do, make the kid smoke a joint, that kind of
And how soon they forget, like you said, they had the example in in front of their very eyes, and now they're still trying to peel back rights and not. I mean, when Jaden's law was brought up and then they've seen that happen, they should have just fast tracked it and it should have just been through. I don't understand why it's so.
It was introduced during well before the summer. Like they could have said, okay, this should be for the school year. That's when it's mainly applicable. So let's get it teed up and ready to get going, so it has some time to be able to be used this year. But there was no momentum behind it.
By the way,
I just don't understand the what's the friction? It's like it's a win-win for everyone. If you put your name on that bill, you would think that it's election year. Look what I did. You know what I mean? It's just I don't understand.
Because cannabis is still treated like the redheaded stepchild. No offense to the redheads or the
As if the
stepchild.
propaganda were true.
The kids who suffer
Okay.
because people want to hold on to old beliefs. I don't
They still
understand
treat it.
that.
No, they know they're wrong.
bad
It's
argument.
not even old beliefs. They don't believe that shit. They
No,
knew
it's
that
all been
shit was
propaganda.
wrong.
They knew it was propaganda, but it still sinks in deep, man.
So if
People
they
don't
don't
wanna
believe
learn
it
about it.
and they still are not helping kids, then that's even worse.
They've completely shut cannabis. Well, they completely regulated cannabis away from anybody under the age of 18 in my township. It's a medical marijuana ordinance, right, for
And they can't have
patients
it in
and
concentrate
caregivers, and it
or
says nobody
tinctures.
under 18 can access medical cannabis. And I'm thinking, so hopefully this does pass, and it starts getting some of these townships to also start changing some of their thoughts on this.
That's a very
That's
challengeable thing.
asinine.
Medical
Yes.
cannabis
Someone
to
gets
be
told they
like
can't, then
available
that's
as a first option for pediatric patients.
it should be.
Yeah,
Latricia,
for
go ahead.
many patients, for pediatric patients, it's considered like the method of last resort, and I think that that's a shame that so many children perhaps would benefit appropriately with, there's autism, there's children with cancer, there's the Jim Powers and Aaron Powers' son Ryan. He has the kidney disease, and there's so many children. It should be available as a first option instead of having to go through the whole medical process and trauma, sometimes years of like intensive treatments with the medical establishment, when cannabis is a safe and effective medicine and ought to be offered as a potential first option. So some of those things are these criteria is exactly what we were talking about, like the accessibility for with the law or policy, if a state allows it on the school, is one. The ability for you to grow your own, so some of these like points and criteria we look at, and how we did the grade for A, B, C, D, or F. But if you're penalties, we had some penalties too. So Michigan received some penalty points because we don't have access for our children, pediatric patients in schools.
Yeah, and that's something that other states noticed.
So you
Latricia,
can
you were
tune in tomorrow
yeah.
at the safeaccessnow.org. You can become a member and you get the link, or you can hear about it at our chapter meeting tomorrow. But I'm excited to share how well Michigan's doing in like many areas that we can do better.
Or how poorly. Yeah.
Trish, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I don't know what the gentleman's name for Red Sutter Farms, but I wanted to speak about that. We actually were, it was Buddy Dalton, Jen Bronson, myself, Amy, and a few other people. We had went out to the Arbella Township meeting. It's been a while since I've been to one of those. So one of the rules, or this guy must have read about an alphabet-sized list full of different ordinances that he wanted to add, and it was just excruciating, like feeling like fingers on a chalkboard. A lot of things that he listed were already within the act. Said that nobody under the age of 18 could use medical marijuana, and it was just cool to watch Amy stand up and punch her fist on it. She's like, "You can't do that, my son, blah 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 blah," and it's just the ignorance. So if anybody's watching, please pay attention to what's going on in your township, because right now there's a lot of ambulance chaser lawyers out there just waiting to get their dibs on whatever township they possibly can. That's basically it looked like to me. I mean, these people on these councils don't know anything about this. They take advice from an attorney, and this attorney's actually just running them all over. So sometimes it's just bad because they feel like they're doing the right thing. All along, they're just creating more criminals.
Shout out to the work that all they do. The Michigan Weedsters. They set up groups on both Facebook and Instagram that I know of. You can follow them there and keep up to date.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. And then Pecan. Yeah, Pecan also too. I like to give I always give a shout out to John Bronson and Buddy Dalton. They really are behind a lot of the movement there. I can only do so many things at one time, so I've been doing a lot of stuff at the Capitol. But they've been keeping up on top of it. Just like I said, the one out in Mundy Township lasted 8 months. And that's just the commission board. It hasn't even went to their council yet, you know, and it's because of the ignorance and the stigma. So
when you see the same language repeated in different municipal ordinances, it's troubling because it means it has a common origination. Skilbo, go ahead, get in.
That's my thought.
What I was going to say is it's a small world, Spartan, because we just mentioned this, and to be talking to her right now is like, wow, man. Shout out to our show.
This is my first time ever even virtually meeting you, Latrisha.
Exactly.
So I just want to personally thank you for all the work that you do for cannabis. We appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Same thing to
Agreed. I concur.
Now, there's lots of heroes out there right now, but there's few people showing up to do the job, and Latrisha and Amy certainly have been showing up to do the job. Zara Abbas, I can think of it, you know, as another person who's really getting the job done too. And we've had some friendly legislators that have offered us their services. You know, Cynthia Johnson and her staff, including Richard Clement.
Cynthia Johnson sent out a anti-5512 letter to all the other legislators.
Yep. Yep. So when you look at the number of people that submitted testimony by a written statement for 5512 against the bill itself, looks pretty impressive. Cannabis Freedom Coalition, the Rep. Johnson's office, Americans for Safe Access. Jamie has a personal letter, sent one out too. We talked about other people that had done the same. That's a lot of
continuing to get meetings too. I know the Cannabis Caucus is. We've got a few lined up for the next couple of weeks. And, you know, if it does get out of committee, I'm really happy to hear that it's not leaning necessarily in that way. One of the things that the church said that Rep. LeGrand mentioned is that some of the things brought up to him from those who had discussions. I was one of them. Zara Boss mentioned before was one of them. He said he spoke to other people. He mentioned that he was educated, that he you know, didn't look at it that way, and or something like that. Latrisha, I don't know, but he was willing to question it more because he got new information, and you know that can happen. Is what the point is. You know?
Yep.
I think the same thing happened with Mueller.
Oftentimes, people just know the first thing that they were told about something, and they adopt that because they didn't have anything to challenge it. And if the first words that they heard were by, you know, a real kind of public relations specialist paid for by some special interest group to go to your office and sell you on this program, those guys can be really convincing.
You know what? And I just thought about this, Trish, and please, I think you mentioned earlier in a discussion that they did bring up the Tui case. They called him Thu. And that they understood the logic behind how it would solve the problem by just codifying that decision into law. If you got your card, you can use your medicine. Wasn't there some discussion about that?
They had brought up the Tui case. It was actually the judge that was, I believe, sitting with Representative Kelly. The only thing that they had brought up basically is that that law had passed and that it's already something that has been going on, and that they're afraid that it was going to interfere with their program.
Yeah, they just admit it.
You know, and it's like this: you can smoke, you can take medical marijuana in prison, and you can do it on probation. So it looks like drug courts might get a little nervous that nobody wants to go to drug court anymore.
Right.
Well, right, and that's the thing, is that they have special powers in drug court. They have special control over you, and they get you to give up rights that you can't give up in other courts, and they like that.
Yep.
Extrajudicial system that they approve there.
Right.
You know.
Now, it's in exchange for less time. I mean, you know, they do that in prison also, where they give you the option for a much more intense or different program, and you'll do less time. The problem is most of those programs are abusive in nature.
You know, Adam, I'm curious. I wonder how many people fail out of drug court because of cannabis use. I wonder if it's a significant percentage of people that fail drug court just because they smoked weed to stop the heroin cravings, right? Or is it just something that's a minor thing, and they're making a big deal out of it?
They're making a very big deal out of nothing. They haven't mentioned it that there was only one.
Well, I think their issue.
Wait a second. Hang on. Latrisha, explain. There was only one. Explain that, please.
So they asked that question. They said, you know, how big of a problem is this situation? And the gentleman that was speaking said that they can recall maybe one.
Maybe one what?
One person that has gone through drug court.
that failed because of
cannabis.
Was a medical marijuana patient. That's it.
I think they hear the argument. Here's what I think happens. I think they're tired of guys like me, you, and the rest of us, who, if we showed up in drug court, we would say, listen, I got a weed card. You got to let me use this. And they say, no, here, Mr. Brook, here's how it works. If you want to participate in our system, you're going to give up all your rights and you're going to do it my way, or you're not going to do it. And I think about it for a minute and I go, okay, boss, I'll do it your way. At which point I don't fail because I want to get this shit done.
Amy Carter, who we've been referring to recently, just chiming in here. Just want to point out. Go ahead, Rick. Sorry, Paul
Talenda on a previous episode of Jazz Cabbage Cafe. Paul Talenda said that criminal defense attorneys are winning these arguments in court when they challenge drug courts, when they say that they can't use their cannabis, their medical cannabis, because of the Toohey decision. So it certainly seems like judges who just want the system to not change, they want to continue to have their previous permissions that were taken away by the Supreme Court, are just trying to regain that power. But the Supreme Court said, no, baby, no, we got rights. So,
well, that's why they want to codify this in law for their little special court system they have.
Yep.
You know, I mean, personally, I'm not even sure if I'm a fan of drug court.
Hey, you know what? As we're kind of winding in down toward the end. Sorry, Adam, just kind of time got away from me. I didn't realize it was like 10 to 6.
Good.
I did want to mention the fact that the Bros Grow show is the core of the cast is here, and there's some other offshoot shows and do a lot of great stuff, and I'm kind of hurting for time a little bit now, but unfortunately, I don't want to skip that. I also kind of want to spin around about everybody, like, or at least somebody mentioned, the times of the shows and if everybody's involved in another one, and a little bit of background info. Let's at least get an introduction to what's going on and where and when these broadcasts are, if you don't mind.
Well, basically, we have some of us from Michigan Bros Grow Show are here today. So Painted Lady and Spartan and Red Setter Farm and Sequence and myself. We focus on the same kind of things that you do. We look at Michigan and everything that's going on with the growing, and we've tapped into the community, and it's really neat because we're all part of the same show, the same culture. So there's such an overlap where we have been on your show, you guys have been on ours, and it's just tapping into the community and trying to stay up to date on things. And I don't know, what do you think, Sequence?
Yeah, I would just say that the main difference between your show and ours is we focus on growing content mostly, and that's what we do, and all the various forms of growing. All these different guys in the panel grow a different way, Painted Lady included. Skilbo would know all of the show times, so he can list those off nice and easy.
It's super easy. So one great thing is, if you were really interested in cannabis content here on YouTube, is come through on Mondays, because you've got Medical Mondays. They come on over on their channel. That comes on at 9 o'clock. And then after that show, you come over to Michigan Bros Grow Show for the late sesh, which is really cool because all 5 of us here, kind of like the Thundercats, Power Rangers, however you wanted to really look at it, whatever color. I don't know who's going to wear what colors.
Ultron, bro.
Ultron. Okay, right on.
I want green. Come on,
So the late sesh is on from 11 until 1 in the morning, and it's really just that sesh where you get together with your friends, and there is no topic. It's just really, really funny. And like last night, we had our own little version of the late sesh game show. So if anybody wants to check that out, go back over to our show.
Oh man, that's a hell of a show to fucking have people go to.
Let's start off with this. But no, we really started off as a podcast originally. Sequence and I used to interview people from Michigan. And that's how we got a lot of the people on our panel. Is we had interviewed them for a show, put it out as a podcast. And then my idea, where I came from, was a show that was a live stream. And I really thought that would be a great way for us to tap into the Michigan community. So on July 10th, 7/10, I just figured it out. We have over 100 episodes now. So we started what's called the Bro Show Live. The Bro Show Live is a community-driven program in live stream where you can interact with us, ask questions. Sometimes we have topics, we cover shit. But it's really been about community building. So that comes on Sunday nights at 9 p.m. We also do something that's called Wake and Bake with the Groskis every few Saturdays. That comes on Saturday mornings at 9 a.m.
So I told you would know all that. That's a lot.
And then on Thursday, there's Polarity Science with Red Cider Farm and Skilbo.
Right. But that's not on the MBGS channel. That is over on the Polarity Science channel.
Oh, my bad. Damn, I was trying to help out.
Then there's a spin-off from the late sesh. We started getting a little taboo with topics, and because the Michigan Bros Grow show had such a large following, we didn't want the taboo nature of the late sesh, busting that up in any sort of way. So I kind of went and I created a harm reduction / entheogen discussion type of a channel, right? We talk about mushrooms, we talk about LSD, we talk about safety, most importantly, how to test substances, which is really important, especially because there's a plethora of just fake substances that's going around. There's things that are being passed off as, let's say, LSD. When I was, 13, 14 years old, my cousin ate some mushrooms that were death caps. They were known as death caps, and they actually almost killed him. He went into a coma. Fortunately, it was only for 9 days, but he did lose his liver during that time. He was only 14 or 15 years old. So I saw him in the hospital. I saw him while he was in his coma. It was very difficult for me. For a long time, I didn't know whether to trust this medicine, outright, or from a dealer. Objectively, I did a lot of research. In my late teen years, into my early 20s, I did try it myself, and I did realize the therapeutic effects that they had. Was an activist for them for the next decade or so, and here we are today. And I live in the the Washtenaw County area, just outside of the Ann Arbor borders, where entheogens are now decriminalized and have been opened up. And so there's a lot more information there's more discussions that need to be had over whether or not you just take a handful of mushrooms and trip for medicinal effects, because there's far more to just like the microdosing aspects, and there's far more to most of it is all dose dependent, and dose is the discussion that most people aren't having on that topic. So
the good thing about the program, though, is that we've really built on the community. Just like, again, saying how we've met up. When we went to Entheo Fest, we've seen a lot of familiar faces again. So it's a very small community, but it's got a lot of strong roots. And
building that community around harm reduction. So we do that show on Thursday nights at 9 p.m.
And these are YouTube channels. So people are saying, I think Theo's asking for a link, and I think maybe that's what
it's also the podcast is also on major podcast platforms,
and it's on all the other stuff too. And he's like, he found some. Okay, and he's starting. Okay, good.
I saw a link to Anchor. That's where all the audio goes. It's all Stitcher and iTunes and all that stuff goes through Anchor. But then we have the YouTube channel, Mich Bros Grow Show. If you Google YouTube that, you'll find it. Spartan's on there catching his beard on fire. We talk mostly about Michigan companies and brands and laws and stuff like this. Definitely not to the knowledge that you guys have, but we try to keep people informed. We know that you guys are very specialized in this, so we can point people this direction if they're looking for a lot of education on that avenue. But we just try to keep it a little bit educational. Like I said, the late sesh, we just try to sesh. We're smoking and having fun. We did a game show on there. On the Bro Show Live, we interview guests, breeders, and we've had Ed Rosenthal on there and lots of other high-profile guests as well. We like to do all sorts of things.
Right on. And that is a really good show. And we had Rob from Cannabis Lifestyles, Rob and Trey, and their various shows.
We had them on a couple weeks ago, I think it was. Yeah, they're awesome.
And they get to everything, but the basis is like this growing discussion, and that's really popular. And both you guys do a really great job of it. And
it's the good vibes in Michigan, man. That's the thing that a lot of these shows all have, is that it's trying to build positive communities and positive partnerships between people.
We just saw everything being
we have in common.
We saw everything being kind of clicky, and then Sequence and Skilbo was like, let's just be what we're looking for. And then everybody just kind of started joining up, and now it's just one big group of people that is open-minded, and we're not judgy, and we're just, hey, why don't you just include everybody? And what the hell, it's fucking amazing, right?
And interestingly, not only because we didn't want to be cliquey, we're not only open-minded, we're opposite-minded. All of us are
Yes.
completely different, like by design. We all do different stuff by design. Like we all wear shoes. Red never wears shoes. All sorts of stuff. And,
Wookfoot.
and it really works for us because we're
I wear
very
shoes
well
I wear shoes between December and March.
Okay.
I just want to say thank you for having us on the program today. We really do appreciate it. Thanks for all the information, guys.
Thank you guys, man. Well, I mean, we'll do it again at some point. We do a lot of these, and this was a good discussion. I wouldn't mind resuming something like this, and whatever current topics are that we have to discuss. Hopefully, some of them be a little bit more positive than some of the things.
I learned a lot. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'd
really
like to
appreciate
jump
it.
in.
Thanks so much.
Guys.
I'd like to come in later and jump in and discuss more with you on. You guys were talking earlier. I was listening at work. The testing. I've got some insight on that you guys I don't think are really considering. Then I'd like to give you kind of the inside the industry look into a little more on that.
Nice
What's
teaser.
going on with that.
Hey, well, it's an ongoing scandal, man. There's still an investigation out there, and so there's still going to be more that we have to discuss about it. So that's.
I'd
no
love
problem.
to hear a new angle on that story. I would.
Yeah, man.
So
Yeah.
another time. Yeah.
Dun, dun,
Yeah.
dun.
And so, Brandy, do you want to leave us with anything?
Thank you for the opportunity to spread the word of ASA. Thank ASA members for all that you do. I see, a lot of you on this panel are ASA members, and just really appreciate all of you. We have our chapter meeting tomorrow. It'll be Wednesday from 7 to 8:30. So hope to see you there. Get to hear about the State of the States report, and we'll talk about more about the state law and how we can help the local effort and be ever vigilant. Our movement is always growing.
Right on.
And thank you.
Right on. Hey, Trish, anything that you want to get in?
Oh yeah, I was just telling Brandy I'll see her tomorrow. I've been involved in a lot of things, so yeah, no, thanks for having me on. It's cool to meet all of you guys. I'm gonna go back and watch your show from last night now, so I'm kind of curious.
Right on.
So you win. But no, thank you very much, everybody. Have a great night.
I hope that more people
Thank
do.
you.
Adam, anything to wrap up?
No, I'm pretty much good. I've enjoyed this. I would point out, because I opened it during the show, that High Rollers, the growing celebrity cannabis, is the feature story in this month's Penthouse. So it looks like we've hit mainstream with Mike Tyson and the ilk. So I thought that was kind of interesting, because there was a lot of years when these people wouldn't touch us. So it's nice to be included amongst the pretty people of the world.
Nice.
I was wondering who still bought those magazines.
Hey, bro, I got a long time subscription. I was in that magazine once, but that's another story for another show.
Woo.
Probably
All
their
right.
least successful seller, I would imagine. Yes.
Oh man, burn.
Nobody else otherwise has got anything to add? Anybody?
I just want to thank you guys for having us on. I really
Right on.
appreciate it.
Thanks,
for
man.
having us on.
It was a great
Appreciate it.
discussion.
Appreciate
Yeah,
it,
thank you
man.
so much.
Yeah. All right, good. Well, I mean, we're just about on time, just a couple minutes over. That's cool. Rick, you want to carry us out?
Yeah, I sure do. I tell you what, you cannot watch this episode of Jazz Cabbage Cafe without being inspired by people's actions and their activities too. We talk about a network of podcasts where people who in other states are probably competitive. Here we're cooperative, right? We talk about people like Amy and Latrisha going to the legislature to do the things that we need to do. Jamie and I used to do that when we had the need years ago. It's wonderful to see people getting involved. Adam's planning another wonderful event that's just going to blow the doors off it, that really celebrates our culture. And Jamie and I are planning Hash Bash too, along with some other folks as well. And that's just another expression of who we are. If you want to find negativity, you can look for it. But if you want to find positivity, I think that's a funner search. And I'd just like to leave you with that thought.
Yeah, man.
Right on. Thanks again, everybody. Thanks everybody who was on, and Jazz Cabbage Cafe, and we'll do it again soon. See you guys.
Cheers, everybody.